This is one of the most blatant disregard for Asian lives that I've ever seen, because when a firefighter in San Francisco tried to unalive one of their Asian firefighters, the whole San Francisco Fire Department, instead of firing that guy and dealing with it through the law, has resorted to illegally tampering with a police investigation, intimidating a witness, and then firing the victim who almost was unalive at the hands of the other firefighter. This is 58-year-old Gabriel Shin, who on top of being an Army vet has been a San Francisco firefighter for the last 27 years. And he was based out of Station 25, which is essentially located right on the harbor on the east coast of San Francisco. And on February 1st, 2022, and I know it was a while ago, but the reason that it's coming up again is because the court documents have just been released and it contains all of the details that I'm going to go over with you, and it's going to make you so mad. So on February 1st, 2022, after working his shift, Gabriel Shin came to his house in Oakland, California, and immediately started helping his neighbor sweep the sidewalk in front of their homes. When all of a sudden, Gabriel Shin's coworker of 20 years out of the 27 years that he's been a firefighter, Robert Mohammad, surprised Gabriel Shin while he was sweeping the sidewalk, and because Gabriel Shin knew that he was going to be aggressive, and I'm going to get into that later, he immediately put the broom down and said that he did not want to fight. At which point Robert Mohammad pulled out a hydrant wrench, this 15-inch long solid brass hydrant wrench, and Robert Mohammad, who was essentially 6 inches taller, 9 years younger, and 30 pounds heavier than Gabriel Shin, raised the wrench high overhead and started swinging it at full force at Gabriel Shin's head. And because Robert Mohammad is deliberately aiming for Gabriel Shin's head, Gabriel Shin is just running away screaming, "Robert, stop, Robert, stop." And there are even neighbors outside who are also yelling at him to stop. In fact, one of the neighbors even screamed out that they just called the police. But neither the fact that there are multiple witnesses and the fact that their police are coming was enough to deter Robert Mohammad from stopping trying to unalive Gabriel Shin. And within seconds, Robert Mohammad has swung the wrench over 12 times, and Gabriel Shin is just trying to block them with his right arm, so his right arm takes a beating. Then Robert Mohammad swung the wrench so hard that it broke Gabriel's ulna bone, snapped his glasses in half, and sent it flying across the other side of the street. And even with all of that, it still made contact with Gabriel Shin's face, to the fact that he was suffering from a severe concussion, which obviously sent Gabriel Shin flying backwards towards the ground, at which point Robert Mohammad raised the wrench above his head as if he was about to deliver a final blow. It was at that exact moment that one of Gabriel Shin's neighbors, who works rescuing trafficking victims, came out brandishing her firearm pointed at Robert Mohammad and told him to stop. And it was only because of that that Robert Mohammad stopped, ran away, and it was only because of that neighbor that Gabriel Shin is even alive today. And even after almost losing his life, Gabriel Shin didn't intend to himself. Being the firefighter that he is, he started worrying about his other firefighters to warn them about Robert Mohammad. You thought that was wild? This is the part where it actually gets wild. You see, Robert Mohammad has a history of threatening, bullying, and violence. For instance, one time Robert Mohammad was doing something at the firehouse that he wasn't supposed to be doing, and when a superior officer told him that he wasn't supposed to do that, he told him, "Fuck you, shove your badge up your ass," which could be taken as a joke, but then later on he was bragging about it to the other firefighters, and one of those firefighters said, "Hey man, that wasn't cool." He said, "Fuck you too." He got up all in that other firefighter's face as if he was trying to start a fight, to the point that another firefighter had to pull him off to prevent an altercation, and that was not documented. Or like the time that Robert Mohammad didn't agree with the scheduling that week, so he tried to fight the person who did the scheduling, to the point that another firefighter had to pull him off to avoid another altercation, and that wasn't documented as well. Or like in October 2021, in the middle of the pandemic, when there was a vaccine mandate for the whole fire department and Robert Mohammad was not vaccinated, and when his captain, Patricia Lee, told him that he couldn't work, he got so mad at her to the point that another superior officer had to talk him out of harming the captain, and he was described as Rob wanted to fuck her up. Oh, and surprise, that also went undocumented or undisciplined. For context real quick, I need to give you some background information. See, about 7 months prior, in July 2021, Robert Mohammad had a family crisis that even the media is leaving out of respect for his privacy. But when you try to unalive someone, privacy goes out the window, and it's a privilege you don't have anymore because details matter. And this is unconfirmed, but I found this comment on the internet from someone who claimed to have worked with Robert Mohammad, who stated that the family crisis in July of 2021 was this. And during this time, his coworkers are covering his shift, asking if everything's okay, just being overall supportive. But fast forward to January 30th, 2022, 2 days before the attempted murder, and Robert Mohammad asked another firefighter to meet him at a coffee shop in San Francisco. He immediately tells this other firefighter that he's annoyed that people at work are talking about his situation, and immediately gets irate and tries to lunge across the table at that firefighter. Except when that firefighter evades him, he just says to him, "I'm going to straighten Gabe out," and then he leaves. Except as soon as he leaves, he calls Gabriel Shin and says, "The next time I see you, I'm going to fuck you up. So then after that firefighter leaves the coffee shop as well, he calls Gabriel Shin and tells him what transpired, at which point Gabriel Shin tells him that he was just called by Robert Mohammad and told him that he was going to fuck him up. But then the firefighter calls another firefighter that they all work with, who tells him that Robert Mohammad told him that he was going to beat them both up. And then when the firefighter goes into work the next day on January 31st, he files two separate reports, one for the threat that was made to him and one for the threat that was made to Gabriel Shin. And that same day, Gabriel Shin tells Captain Patricia Lee about the threats that were made to him and to the other firefighter the day before, at which point the captain is dismissive of his concerns, doesn't document anything, and just blows it off. And then it was during this time that Robert Mohammad used the computer at the station to illegally look up Gabriel Shin's address and his work schedule so that he could surprise him to unalive him. And Robert Mohammad didn't do this stealthily either. While he was at the station, he told another colleague, and I quote, "I'm going to beat the fuck out of Gabe Shin," and then took the hydrant wrench from the station to use as a weapon. So on February 1st, after the attack, while Gabriel Shin is just laying on the ground bleeding, before the paramedics and the police even get there, he's calling his colleagues at the fire department to try to warn them about Robert Mohammad, including trying to call the chief of the whole San Francisco Fire Department, Janine Nicholson, who does not answer. So then Gabriel calls the deputy chief, Robert Postel, who, when Gabriel Shin told him that Robert Mohammad just tried to unalive him with a hydrant wrench, questioned if it was even Robert Mohammad, even after Oakland PD officers who had finally arrived at the scene reiterated all those details to Robert Postel. And then hours later, when Gabriel Shin's at the hospital, the chief of the fire department, Janine Nicholson, finally calls him back and tells him, "Don't worry, we're gonna take care of it." Except right after that, an Oakland police officer, on the same day that Gabriel Shin had just been attacked, told Gabriel Shin that they were trying to get an arrest warrant for Robert Mohammad, but they were unable to because the San Francisco Fire Department is not cooperating and giving them the information that they need, because there are so many Robert Mohammads in San Francisco to try to find the right one to arrest. And even after he was discharged from the hospital, Gabriel Shin was so scared for his life that he was sleeping in his car on the street and pleading with Chief Nicholson and Deputy Chief Postel to please cooperate with the police, even though they were communicating with Robert Mohammad the whole time. They refused. And even the day after he almost lost his life, supervisors from the fire department were like, "Hey, can't we work something out?" And Lieutenant Joe Certain even called Gabriel Shin to ask him, "You're not really going to press charges, are you?" And when Gabriel Shin refused, Lieutenant Certain ordered him to stop cooperating with the police investigation. And when Gabriel Shin reported this to the fire chief and to the assistant deputy chief David Brown, he just excused the witness intimidation, and then a couple days later, it continued on from other people. And then 2 days later, after he almost lost his life, when Gabriel Shin went to go hand in his medical paperwork, they told him that he was no longer allowed in the building. And then even an internal investigator for the fire department tried to illegally violate his firefighter bill of rights by interrogating him even though he was off duty because he was on leave. And when he complained to the fire chief that he couldn't because he was just diagnosed with PTSD, she tried to illegally force him for the interrogation. At which point Deputy Chief Tom O'Connor tried to convince Gabriel Shin that he didn't even have to have an attorney present, who then threatened him by saying that if he didn't take part in the investigation that he was going to get fired. And then 3 months later, before Gabriel Shin's bones could even heal, they fired him and took away his health insurance without notice. So Gabriel Shin is having to take them all to court, while Robert Mohammad is still collecting checks from taxpayers.